In this episode of Restore It, plans changed for the M40 project as I turned what was meant to be a quick restoration into a much more thorough one. After cleaning the interior in episode 2, it felt a lot cleaner, but I knew it was just a surface level clean, and that just didn't sit right with me. The plan now is to strip down the car almost completely so I can have a good look at the bodywork that needs doing, give it a truly deep clean, and give each part the attention it needs for a finished product I'll be happy with. So in this episode, I'm going to remove as many parts from the interior and exterior as I can, starting with the rear lights, one of which we know is leaking water into the boot and will definitely need a new gasket. Next were the door cards and everything attached to them. I've decided to restore the door cards with a vinyl trim dye, which we'll see the results of in an upcoming episode. I then started on the rest of the boot trim. I'm actually missing one of these load cover latches, so I'm on the hunt for one of those. It would also be nice to find the grey load cover itself. The amount of stuff and dirt under these side trim pieces was shocking. I don't think this 1.6 E30 has ever been taken apart in its 27 years, as I guess it's not a commonly restored model. I haven't yet taken a Touran's interior down this far, and it's interesting to know that you have to take off quite a bit to get to the rear shocks, compared to a sedan, which I think are always on show and easy to get to. This boot lid is coming off, I just thought I might as well remove this piece of trim now. Next up was the rear bench carpet. Before I could remove the main piece of carpet, I had to remove the other interior B-pillar trim and seatbelt. And there we go, the harsh truth about all E30s. They rust, and a half job just won't do. On that note, let's keep stripping. These air ducts were new to me. I don't remember the sedan or M3 having these. Quite cool how they go unnoticed. The other sides seem to be in good condition, but will definitely need looking at more closely. Overall though, the floor isn't bad at all. Well, from this side at least. I gave it a vacuum and then sprayed hot degreaser over the floor and doors because 27 years of dirt wasn't a good look. Once it had time to soak in, I wiped it off with some clean rags. The doors had a bit of sticky residue left on them which I'll remove with solvent in a coming episode before I apply the new vapour barriers. After about an hour or two, it was already apparent that I needed to set up the shelves to organise the ever-growing pile of parts. It's nice to have the space to be able to do it, but I think I'm going to need more shelves. The next job was to remove the headliner, a job that involves removing many parts before you can make a start on the headliner itself. Before we do that, I just have a quick word from the sponsor of this episode, AutoDoc. AutoDoc is one of the leading car, truck and motorcycle part suppliers in Europe. With over 2.5 million parts for 166 car brands, they have the parts you need and when you need them. I've used AutoDoc on countless occasions as they always seem to have the parts I'm looking for in a variety of brands and they're always in stock. Using their app, which is available on Android and iOS, you'll have access to one-click purchasing for millions of parts on the go, so you can make sure you get the parts you need as soon as possible at genuinely low prices. Download their app today using the link in the video description to support Restore It and start saving on the maintenance of your vehicle. Big thanks to AutoDoc for the support. Let's get back to the touring. Before I did the headliner, I first removed some more of the boot trim. Like with any piece of old trim, it's at risk of breaking when you remove it, like this piece did. In this series, I'm going to look into fixing these broken clips on pieces of trim like this. I've seen a few inventive ways of doing it and I'd like to try them out on this car, which will allow me to share it with you. Onto the headliner, I started at the back with these 4 clips and worked my way forward. Before the headliner would come free, I had to remove the grab handles, the lights, the sun visors, the sunroof and sunroof handle. With all of those things out of the way, I could start to peel the glued edge of fabric which attaches to the chassis. The inner rear window seals also needed to come out as they sit on top of the liner. Up next was the sunroof, starting with the sunroof seal, which is going to be replaced with a new one. This one had shrunk to the point that it wasn't doing its job anymore. I could then remove the sunroof itself, which I didn't do in the correct order, so don't follow this method if you're going to do it yourself. E30's own wiki has the correct order and way of doing it. After a bit of faffing, it was out and I could free the headliner around the perimeter. At this point the fabric was barely hanging onto the foam, and the last piece holding the foam on was the handle. With one more pull, it was out. Next, I wanted to have a closer look at the boot lid. I started by removing the license plate and mounting trim. It didn't look too good. I grabbed a screwdriver and started stabbing the rust to see how far it went. And it actually ended up not being that bad at all. A few spots on this light area and one in the bottom right hand corner. It'll come off for a full strip down, new metal and new paint. I removed the BMW badge but left the other one to make my own measurements for when I reinstall it. The seat mounting rail did come out but my camera died. And I tried to remove this trim piece with no success. I couldn't remove the covers where the hooks are to get to the screws underneath. I'll have it off during next episode, I'm sure. This carpet looked good, but I had to see if there was any rust underneath it, so it was removed and will be replaced with a new one. The piles of parts were getting out of control at this point, so I built all of the shelves I had at the workshop and filled them up almost straight away. I think I'm going to need 4 times this amount to store everything once it's out. Some of the parts I spoke about in episode 2 have already been sourced, but there's still a lot more to go and the list just keeps getting longer. I'm going to leave the front and rear bumper for later because I want to focus on the trim attached directly to the chassis and also take the bonnet off to prepare for the engine removal. The only thing I needed to remove before the bonnet was the washer fluid reservoir. I could then remove the strut and hinge which freed the bonnet. With that off, I could then get a much better look at the slam panel and panels in the engine bay. Like this one, which I'm sure some of you will remember from the Silver Touring engine bay restoration series. This one has exactly the same issue and will probably need cutting out, but we'll get to that later on. I wanted to remove the lights and the front grills to make enough space as possible for the engine removal. So instead of buying the 2 clips you need to correctly attach the kidney grille, someone has instead decided to drill a hole in the grille and the chassis to screw it in. I think I'll go with the clip method when I put it back together. With the grills off, the headlight trim and the lights themselves were next. I also picked up a few engine bay trim pieces along the way. There were more cable ties holding things together on this car than nuts and bolts in a few places. And that's a good start on the front of the car for now. After a few more bits like the blower motor and the power brake are out, I'll be ready for the engine and gearbox. As it was quite a big job, I wanted to make a start on the exterior trim along the sides of the car, on the doors and the chassis. This meant starting with the wing mirrors. With those out of the way, I could then start on the trim. This is a really delicate task, and I know I screwed it up in a few places ever so slightly, so I'll try and reuse them, but if they don't go back on perfectly, I'll just order new ones. By the end of this, I had learnt how to do each piece the correct way so as to not damage them. So you kind of pay to learn that way. It is what it is. A flathead screwdriver in a cloth was the most useful tool for persuading the trim off the car. Patience was the second most important thing. Some of it, like this D-pillar piece, could be done by hand, made easy by the big clips they attach with. I found these particular window pieces to be very tricky in the beginning, but by the end I had sussed it. You have to pry along the entire length of the piece ever so slightly back and forth until it lifts up easily. All of these little gold clips will be replaced with new ones. They're so brittle and so cheap, they're just not worth reusing. That tapping should be the thing that frees the door bumper trim piece, but for some reason there was a machine screw holding it in place, drilled through the front of the piece of trim and into the door, which kind of took me by surprise. I removed the vapour barriers in the doors, one because it was horrible and two because I needed to get into the doors to remove the outer trim and both pieces of glass. With the window down, I could remove the main window sill that runs along the top, down the sides and all the way into the bottom of the doors. That then revealed the clips that held on the three pieces of trim left on the door, which I then removed. The same then went for the other side. Next was the rear section of the passenger windows. For this, I needed to remove the black piece holding the glass in, and also a bare metal piece at the bottom of the door. It turns out, in order for you to be able to remove that piece, the window first needs to come out. With those two out of the way, I could then shuffle the glass and the seal out. With the smaller piece of glass out, I could then get to the clips that hold the last piece of trim on and remove it. The rear windows are fixed in place, and so are going to be a bit trickier to do. The front windows won't go down for some reason, so that means I can't do the front doors until I sort that electrical issue out, whatever it may be. And the front windscreen is also coming out, just to make it easier to get the headliner back in, and also to get a slightly more thorough paint job. This is just some of the trim that's been taken off so far, but there's plenty of it, and still plenty to go. I'll go through and sort out what needs replacing and what I can restore and reuse. That's all we have time for this episode. Thanks for making it this far, and join me next time when I remove the rest of the trim, the front and back bumpers, the boot lid, the rest of the glass, and the engine and gearbox. Lots of work ahead, but I feel like this one will be done in no time compared to the sedan. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next one.